Hello, fifth grade teachers. This video is being created to help you see how CCAP is laid out to support the U.S. Constitution unit. So from my first page, my year at a glance, I'm going to click on the United States Constitution, and it's going to bring me to this unit of study. So when I see the first tab here, the unit tells me how long it is, and I really like this opening section, which helps you to see what is the big idea of this whole unit. It's a unit description. Down here in unit considerations, you'll see different items added to this section over time, things that might help you as a teacher. They're not necessarily meant to be used within instruction, but they might help you to think a little bit more deeply about the unit. So I encourage you to access those resources. As we go to stage one, I always like to make sure teachers understand how stage one is laid out. This very first section gives us a broad overview of the unit. The very first box is going to be the standards that are from the Colorado Academic Standards, and you'll see how these standards play themselves out or how they become dissected and have different components as part of what students should know, understand, and be able to do. So you can see where those come from. Also, the overarching understandings, which involve where we want students to be by the time they graduate from high school. So you can see where students are going, and you can think about, gosh, what is my role in this type of learning, and how am I helping students to build towards this final understanding? So conceptually for the unit, I like to think of concepts that become the language of the discipline. And I can find those concepts in two locations, I'm sorry. So the first place is in big ideas. So we're going to see language related to civics concepts: citizenship, democracy, government, individual rights versus common good, power and authority. Last, I see citizenship again as an organizing concept, purpose of government, and structure and function of government. When I think of those as part of instruction, those become the language of the discipline, that if I continue to use that language of the discipline over time, students become very familiar with that language and I guess the conceptual idea behind that language. So as I look at the organizing concepts, I'm going to look at them in a way that I think they could be taught. I would initially start with purpose of government. So when I look at the ideas in here, it's this idea of why do we have government? And at a fifth grade level, students are looking, why do we have a constitutional government? Previous grades have looked at community government, school government, local government, state government. And in future grades, students are going to different forms of government, different types of government around the globe. So here we're looking at the purpose of government as it relates to the United States. And the purpose of our government is founded on some particular principles. So you're going to see those played out right here. And we're also going to look at those past influences. Every component of our life and of our government's life is influenced by something. And so those influences cause us to act or behave in a certain way. Same thing with our government, is that it was based on previous experiences. Okay, so once students have that foundation in place, they might look at the structure and function of government. So this is where we traditionally look at the three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. This is where we're going to look at how the branches relate to each other in terms of the system of checks and balances, so that each branch of government is limited or doesn't have too much power. We're also going to look at the concept of federalism, or the idea that there are decisions that are part of the federal government, state government, and local government. Okay, so the very last thing, once students learn about the structure and function of government, I think they would probably approach this idea of citizenship. So now that we know how our government works, what does it mean to be a citizen within the United States? And what certain ideas come with that? So when we think of being a citizen, it means that we are granted individual rights. And when students study the Constitution, they look at it very particularly to study the Bill of Rights and see, well, what are our rights? And they have the opportunity to sort of crack those open and start to understand how rights play out within our society. We also have the opportunity to look at civic ideals. Civic ideals are those ideals that we have in common. While the ideals themselves are in common, we might look at them in different ways, and sometimes that's where we get the tension in our society related to individual rights versus common good. Because when we think of, let's say, a civic ideal of equality, one person might look at equality in that civic ideal in one way, and another person might look at equality in another way. So I'm going to shift now to stage 2, which is where we might consider the assessments that we have for a unit of study. When we think of what's available in here, at this point in time, these are just suggestions, but think of tests and quizzes as what are those factual things that we want students to know? What are some suggestions of those? Academic prompts are those ideas which might be a little bit broader. And they kind of connect a little bit more with conceptual understanding, or I guess you might think of a short constructed response. And then here are ideas related to how you might check for understanding, and what does some of your observation look like within class. You will also notice within the performance tasks that there are some sample performance tasks added. These will continue to grow over time as teachers offer their insights and share some of the work that they're doing in their classroom. These can go here and they are shared with others. So make sure you take a look here to consider what are some broader performance tasks that you might consider within your classroom. I'm now going to shift to stage 3. And the stage 3 tab is where we start to think of, okay, well, what are the lessons and activities that I'm going to do in my class? So I'm going to start over here on the right, and I want to explain how this is organized. So the very first thing you're going to see at the top is a unit outline, a possible approach. This helps teachers to see how you might chunk out the unit. And then you're going to see that the resource bundles down below here are organized actually to match the way the unit outline is set up. So some of you may use that unit outline and say, gosh, this really helps me. I want to use this as my starting place every time. Others may say, oh no, I get the unit outline, or I get how I might approach this unit. I'm going to use these resource bundles to support me. So a resource bundle is the idea that it's not a single resource. It's a collection of resources around a particular topic, and it allows you as a teacher to make some instructional decisions related to what resources you want to use based on the needs of your students and how you're going to use those resources. But they are clumped together because they connect to a particular idea. So when we think of the purpose of government, we have two resource bundles here at the top. The principles of American democracy. You're going to see on that bundle that there are examples of what are the principles of American democracy, and where are these coming from. Next, you're going to see with purpose of government the idea of the influences on our U.S. constitutional government. So you're going to see resources related to European monarchies, the Magna Carta, the constitutional experience, the influence of the Declaration of Independence, and all these ideas that sort of, I guess, were thrown in the pot to say how did the founders decide to create our constitutional government, and what is the purpose of government. So those two go together really well. As we look at the next section, we might be looking at the structure and function of government. So here you're going to see some bundles that will support you. First, looking at the executive branch. Next, looking at the legislative branch, and then last, looking at the judicial branch. When you think of the system of checks and balances, that's when you get into the relationships between the branches of government. Okay, and then as you think about decisions that are allocated to the federal level versus the state and local level, that's where you get this concept of federalism. Very last, we can think of the idea or that organizing concept of citizenship. So here you're going to see the resource bundle for the Bill of Rights and individual rights, so that kids can begin to understand what are some of those rights and really begin to explore how do rights play out for me as a citizen. They can start to understand civic ideals. What are those civic ideals, and what are my responsibilities as a citizen in order to match the behaviors that I have as a citizen with my personal civic ideals. So there's some really great stuff in there and suggestions of civic ideals. Last, there's this idea of what is the U.S. citizenship criteria and process. So how do other people become citizens of our nation? Down here at the bottom, you're going to see some other items that just really didn't fit very nicely into a resource bundle. So you might look at some of these to support you. Historic court cases related to the rights of citizens. In many of our schools, there's the We the People textbook that comes from the Center for Civic Education. So you can see just a single list of what are the different pages within that text that are aligned to this unit of study. And some other things that you might want to look at. Again, this is a great place, but these resource bundles will always retain this type of organization up here. Over on the left, you might see some skill information or different instructional items. So here up the top, we see identifying cause and effect relationships, because that happens significantly in social studies. So I hope this little tour has helped you.